Well, good afternoon. I'm going to invite you to take your seats. I'm looking around the room, and I think I'm getting close to counting all of our Lightning Talk speakers. So if you are not a Lightning Talk speaker, I hope you enjoy the next hour and a half or so. We'll look forward to presentations. We've invited faculty from all 8 of the units in the college, and we have 3 Dean's Fellows that will also share their work with us today. I want to remind you about this format. We've been doing this now for 4 years, which I actually find a little hard to believe, to be honest with you. This is our 4th annual research day, and I think as I was wandering around this morning and listening to the buzz among the posters, there was a great deal of reflection and celebration about, isn't it great not to try to navigate the COVID landscape and do this. So we did what we had to under those circumstances, but it's always great to get back together to see one another. Hope you had a chance to enjoy the poster session this morning. We were just back in the war room, as we call it, sorting through quite a bit of data on poster judging, and we look forward to making announcements about winners. So check your smartphones. You may be getting emails and invitations to stay with us and enjoy the celebration later on this afternoon. I do want to give a word of thanks to all the presenters for this morning as well. We really appreciate you coming out, you sharing. I think it's a neat opportunity to see the breadth and depth of scholarship across the college, and really a nice opportunity to think about how we can collaborate, right, with perhaps colleagues in other units whose work intersects with our own. I want to take a moment to thank all the judges this morning as well. Again, it's impossible to do this without volunteer judges. And I want to offer a word of extra appreciation and thanks for the patience this morning. We had a bit of a glitch, of course, with our system, as many of you are aware, and we had to do some movement quickly to be light on our feet. And so I had always anticipated, being the resident fossil, that I would come in and get the clipboard out and do the judging on paper, but we had to make a move in that direction for reasons other than the fact that Dr. Hickey was in the house. And so thank you again for being willing to be flexible, both as judges and as students. We do appreciate that, and we enjoy doing this and reflecting. So our team will get together in a couple of weeks, and we'll take lessons from this year, including how do we make sure that we're clicking on all cylinders as we move into the future. So we look forward to our opportunity to meet with colleagues this afternoon for Lightning Talks. For speakers, I want to point out to you that your presentation, your slide deck, is on the left-hand screen down here. On the right-hand screen, you'll see in extra large letters a timer that counts down 1 second at a time from 4 minutes to 0. Okay, so Lightning Talks, we take that term seriously. We've given you 4 minutes for your talk. 2 minutes for open Q&A. We'll have some floating microphones, so Tracy's over here. Christina. Catherine, thank you. Okay, talk about public stepping in it. There we go. Okay, Catherine, thank you. I appreciate that. So we've got 2 minutes for Q&A, and I just really would urge you not to be shy. The interactions, the Q&A is always great. That's only 2 minutes, and then I'll be coming back up to the podium to introduce our next speaker. Now, our invitation today on our first speaker would have come from construction management, Dr. Chris Harper. We invited him last fall, and I must take full responsibility for what has unfolded today. Chris let us know last fall that he had a commitment to get to a meeting that entailed him being at DIA this afternoon, and I said, it'll be okay. We want to hear you. We want to listen to what you have to say. And so Chris, perhaps against his better judgment, said yes. And then, of course, started getting texts from the Transportation Services Bureau down at DIA this morning saying we've got some issues, and if you want to get out today, you better get down here sooner than you had anticipated. So I got an email from Chris this morning apologizing for not being able to be here, but really I think the blame resides not with Chris, but with me, and so I'll apologize for that. So we will miss construction management this year, but again, we've had some nice features from our special guest and Mehmet's opportunity to interact with a professional colleague, and so I hope all of you will indulge us, and we'll move on to our second speaker. This is Dr. Sonali Didi, who comes to us from Design and Merchandising. Sonali, welcome. And I promise, by the way, your timer doesn't start until you get to the podium.
Pressure is on. I can't see the timer really good, so. Very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for giving the stage to share our research, engagement, teaching in the journey here. So thank you, CHHS and the Research Day team. I wanted to start, I don't know if, how do I move the slides out?
How do we move the slides?
Is it 2 minutes already? It says 2 on this one. Okay, thank you. My area of research, and I wanted to start with the innovation. And I always think about why innovate. And let me say this, that our department is design and merchandising. My area is sustainable clothing consumption and production. And why is this necessary? Because each one of us is wearing clothes. Definitely, but we need to know where they're coming from, what's the impact, how do we think about it, and I'm just going to provoke you, taking on from our keynote speaker today, is 11 million tons of clothes end up in the US landfill alone every year. That's huge. We don't ask ourselves where our clothes end up once we donate because we feel good by donating. We have transferred our responsibility, and that's where my research comes in, is what happens to clothes after they're donated, trashed. Sometimes we can't donate, so it just ends up in landfills. So why do we do the things we do? How do we do how can we do things differently? And how do we think of the entire system? And those are my 3 components of my research, is taking a systems approach. I always think about, if I change something, how can it change the system? If I chose differently about how many clothes I buy or why do I need to buy, it's going to change something in the system. How are companies rethinking their supply chains around designing better so that it does not end up in landfills, but can we use it in a different way? So systems thinking, interdisciplinary research collaborations, that's huge for me. I have worked with colleagues from political science, ecosystem science, and sustainability, because life cycle analysis is a huge thing, especially of clothing. How many times we wear, where does it end up? And there is also a water component. Did we all think that there was a water component? Yes, there is a water component. One more figure for you. It takes about 700 gallons of water for one t-shirt across its entire life cycle. That's huge. It takes 4,000 liters of water for one denim pant. So every time when you go and buy a denim, that's the water impact which we have. So companies are rethinking about how they design, how they produce, and we as consumers need to think about how can we consume differently, consume for a better planet and climate change. Next slide, please. And in terms of integration, I do have education and research, and as I said before, I take an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach to my research, and 2 parts of it. One is education. The awareness piece of it is huge because people don't know what's the impact of individual consumption on the society and societal consumption on the planet. So educating awareness is huge in my research. And right now, my project which I'm working on is regenerative and place-based fiber economies. One more figure for you. Colorado is the 2nd largest producer of wool in the country. Did we know that? No. I know at least 1 in 5 people here does knitting, quilting, sewing, and we have a fiber-based economy here in Colorado. And how do we elevate that? That's the project which I'm working with my ag colleagues in developing a Colorado asset-based mapping. An alternative business model. We may think that okay, 9 seconds. Not setting a great example, but we rent clothes now. We subscribe for clothes now. It's a different rental model. It's a different consumption model. So how are we rethinking our systems of consuming? And that's what leads to my next slide and my last slide. There's a lot of it, so I'm just going to say the primary research, lots of awareness, lots of education. I do mending cafes. We have done as a team, we have done mending cafes in the community, lot of community and industry engagement, trying to connect with fiber farmers here in Colorado, working with industry, and then always moving towards system change and the vision for a sustainable Colorado Fiber Systems Collaborative and sustainable Colorado recreation economy. Both of these are where my vision goes for the future, at least for the next 5 years. I think I'll be busy. But do I still have 1 more minute?
So there are companies that say they are working more sustainably. Is there a way to really understand those numbers, or is it just like they can say whatever they want?
I think that's a great question. I think it was a wave. First, companies did a lot of greenwashing, and now they know that it's going to hit their bottom line. So they're doing these commitments, but it's difficult for them to put in numbers and actually say they're doing it. Like, there are lots of climate goals, but the industry is very complex for them to know whether they're actually doing it or not. So we just have to wait and see, and each company is doing things differently. So there's nothing which is standardized, nothing which is organized as of now, but I know the industry is consciously moving towards it. Previously, 10 years back, I would say it was more greenwashing, but now they're really focused on doing it, but they're trying to create systems that works for everyone. It's just because the supply chain of our industry is so complex. We could have like 4 tiers of suppliers, and then to expect them to write their carbon emissions, it's just impossible right now.
Word of thanks to our friends in the AV booth for being light on their feet. We appreciate it. And for pointing out the location of this. So we can now advance our own slides. Remarkable. Next up is Dr. Charlene Van Buiten from Food Science and Human Nutrition. Charlene.
Hello, my name is Charlene Van Buiten. I'm an assistant professor in food science and human nutrition, and my research group, the Food Structure and Function Lab, is innovating the field of food science and human nutrition by investigating how food processing can be used to enhance human health. Food processing is broadly defined as the transformation of raw agricultural products into items that are fit for human consumption. So while your sort of first thought of food processing might be something like strawberry donut flavored Oreos or a brightly colored Pop-Tart, something like the conversion of wheat into flour and that flour into bread also counts as food processing. And we as humans are the endpoint to food processing, so changes that we make to food upstream in that process has the potential to impact health downstream. The first way that we're investigating, that we're pursuing this goal is investigating the nutritional impact of replacing traditional ingredients like dairy with novel sustainable ingredients. So for example, we know that blueberries contain phytochemicals that have biological effects like antioxidant properties, anti-inflammatory properties, and we also know that the bioavailability of these compounds can be increased if they're consumed alongside cow's milk. But there's an increasing consumer interest in things like plant-based milks. So we are investigating the impact of proteins and those interactions with those phytochemicals on their bioavailability and health outcomes as well. What we've found so far is that these plant-based proteins actually have the ability to bind to these phytochemicals better than animal-based proteins, which we expect will help to increase bioavailability. And if you're interested in participating in this study, my co-PI Sarah Johnson and I are recruiting for a clinical trial right now, so keep your eyes peeled for any emails if you're interested. We are also interested in understanding how traditional food processing techniques can be modified to meet the needs of modern consumers. Modern bread production uses isolated yeast cultures to produce consistent, predictable results, but these usually need to be augmented by the addition of chemical additives to help improve things like shelf stability or quality. Sourdough fermentation, on the other hand, is a more traditional approach, and we've seen that these breads can produce great enhanced organoleptic properties, enhanced nutritional properties, and better shelf stability. But because these products are fermented with very diverse microbiomes, they can have diverse outcomes, and no two starters really are the same. So we're in the process of defining the relationship between microbial structure and functional outputs in fermentation, with the goal of identifying or producing starters that can consistently and predictably target specific quality parameters in bread production without the use of additives. My group's take on food science integrates with the College of Health and Human Sciences due to our shared goal in optimizing the health, well-being, and positive development of people and communities. So no matter who you are, you need to eat. And the food that you choose can have a very profound impact, not only on your physical health, but also environmental health. So by studying foods that have an impact on health, sustainable plant-based products, and sustainable processes, we're chasing this goal of optimizing food products that can optimize human health. The impact of our research, trying to see the timer, is apparent when we're considering the challenges to the food supply that we have today. Food is becoming more inaccessible, it's becoming less sustainable, and it's becoming very expensive. When we look at problems for human health, we have an unprecedented population growth, and the people that we do have on this planet are living with more and more chronic diseases, so we're getting sicker. We are approaching these problems by developing sustainable processing techniques to enhance nutritional quality and provide accessible options to improve human health. We've been lucky to receive support from partners in the food industry, in the medical field, and the federal government, and we look forward to using these connections to implement our findings in terms of recommendations for the food industry and recommendations for the human diet. Thank you.
Hi there, great talk.
Thanks.
Could you speak to connections between food, nutrition, and also mental health? I was very interested in that kind of aspect of your presentation.
Sure, yeah. So that is not my area specifically. In terms of health and disease, my group focuses mostly on gut health. But there is a very active area of research studying the link between gut health and mental health. And so I think that kind of the work that we're doing does connect to mental health kind of in that way. So if we have food products that have a different impact, for example, on the gut microbiome, that gut-brain axis link could impact mental health as well. I think there also is an aspect that probably several of my colleagues can speak to a little better than I can, but just in terms of mental health, how the choices you make can affect how you feel about yourself and how, your general well-being is affected just on choices, more so than the biological impact, which is where we are. But certainly I have colleagues in my department who could speak to that.
One quick comment and then a question. The comment is, based on the last talk, what do you think about edible clothing? You don't have to answer that. And the question is, I was thinking about processing. So where does the processing start? Like, have you done things like if you give the cows blueberries, does it improve the quality of the milk and the antioxidants in the milk? Things like that.
So we have not worked really that far up in the processing stream. So the way where I visualize our work is after plants have been harvested, after animals have, I don't work with meat, but if I did, after animals have been slaughtered. So we're kind of that post-harvest area. But there is a lot of research that's been done on the way that an animal's diet, as you mentioned, can affect the quality of their meat products or their dairy products, for example. So that's definitely possible, and it definitely exists. Not what we're working on right now, but certainly I think in the future you might see more of that.
Now, Dr. Bell's got me wondering about blueberry-flavored milk, so we'll save that conversation for later, perhaps. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Heather Leach from the Department of Health and Exercise Science. Is that the wrong slide? Is that okay?
No, I was just saying, did I get demoted to back to assistant? All right, just getting my bearings here. Hi, everyone. So thank you first to the college for inviting me to give this talk. Okay. I direct the Physical Activity for Treatment and Prevention Lab in the Department of Health and Exercise Science, and the goals of my lab are to help cancer survivors increase and maintain physical activity. We're also interested in looking at the effects of exercise interventions on physical and psychosocial outcomes. And finally, we also are really interested in delivering practice-based evidence and promoting our interventions and programs through the community to both enhance knowledge translation as well as increase the reach of our interventions and programs. So to do this, we utilize innovative approaches in behavioral science. And the first of these is trying to understand the heterogeneity in response to interventions in terms of long-term physical activity. So we're pretty good at getting people to be physically active and exercise. When we bring them into the lab, we enroll them in our interventions, and we're watching them. We're really good at getting them to be active. But at some point, these interventions have to end, and when they do, we've noticed that some people are really successful at maintaining these behaviors, whereas others tend to kind of fall off or relapse. So we recently received funding from the National Cancer Institutes to look at an adaptive physical activity maintenance intervention in which we're going to deliver resources or divert resources to those who need it the most. The second approach that we're really interested in is a translational framework in which we utilize practice-based evidence, again, to try to understand how some of our interventions and programs are working in clinical and community settings. So by studying these processes and procedures in the real world, we can then go back and inform our clinical trials, our interventions in our laboratory settings. The vision of the College of Health and Human Sciences is to optimize health and well-being and positive development of people and communities. And the goal of our lab to promote physical activity for cancer survivors aligns directly with this vision by trying to improve both the physical and psychosocial well-being of our participants. Further, by, as I said, integrating practice-based evidence into our program of research, specifically through Fit Cancer, our community-based outreach program, which is led by graduate and undergraduate students in my lab, we aim to embody the mission of the college by creating transformative academic, research, and community-based programs. All right, last one. So with this slide, I was asked to highlight the impact of my scholarly work. And what immediately came to my mind was an email that we received from one of our participants that I read often, but not often enough that I've memorized it. So I'm going to paraphrase it here. So she said, "I was only given 12 months to live due to the type of cancer I have. Today is day 420, and my year checkup went well. If it was not for this study, which taught me how to exercise and how to become more active, I do not think I would be here. I'm reaching my 10,000 steps almost daily and hitting between 100 to 150 activity minutes per week. So again, thank you to the team for taking the worst time in my life and giving me hope." So taken together, the ultimate goal and impact of the work in my lab is twofold. First, we aim to improve the lives of our participants through physical activity. It's well known that physical activity can improve cancer-related outcomes. So this includes treatment-related side effects like fatigue and physical function, and we know it's associated with improved survival. But like many health-related behaviors, the challenge is getting people to actually do these things. So what we want to do is utilize novel evidence-based approaches to be the support system to help cancer survivors engage in active behaviors. Second, my hope is that my scholarly work also enriches the lives of the students who make these interventions and programs happen. It's not often that our lab work results in life-changing experiences for both our research subjects and the students who work with them. But I'm fortunate to hear this feedback on a daily basis, and for that, I'm very grateful. Thank you. Sorry. Oh, I went over. So close.
Dr. Bell. Yes. Lifeline.
Thank you, Heather. Can you tell us what type of activities are best for people recovering from cancer? Like, should they be lifting big, heavy weights? Should they be going for runs? What is it, endurance, resistance, a bit of both?
Yes, so our strongest evidence is going to be for aerobic activities, so moderate to vigorous aerobic exercise is most strongly associated with things like mortality risk, as well as most of our cancer-related outcomes, such as fatigue, improved physical functioning, depression, anxiety. We do have some evidence for resistance training as well, but not as strong, not at the same level as aerobic. But the current guidelines suggest both for cancer survivors. Thanks for that softball.
Time for one more.
I have one question related to, oh, no. Did you have one? Okay. Hi, great presentation.
Thanks.
Can you tell us, I think piggybacking off of that, can you tell us a little bit more about like what kinds of cancers you're really trying to work with, and does it matter?
Yeah, great question. The answer is it depends on the goal of our study. So right now, we just finished up a pilot trial for colorectal cancer survivors. So we specifically selected that cancer type because a lot of colorectal cancer is linked to lifestyle behaviors like physical inactivity. So one of our goals was to help those survivors change their behaviors after their diagnosis. Our outreach program, Fit Cancer, we are open to all cancer types. So we have a very diverse set of cancer diagnoses throughout that. But again, it definitely depends on the goal of the study. So whether it's increasing activity behaviors or if we're really interested in a very specific physical or psychosocial outcome.
Thank you, Heather. I have to tell you, just to give you some sense of appreciation for the challenge of doing a lightning talk, you've got this timer down here that's flashing away, and when it gets under 2 minutes, it changes colors. Then when it gets under 1 minute, the numbers get considerably larger and they turn red. It's very stressful, and I'm not even giving the talks. So thank you for those of you, again, who are willing to hang in there and deliver these talks. And Heather, you're a little competitive, I have to tell you. We were chatting this morning, and Heather said, I had 3 minutes and 45 seconds when I was practicing it. And if you were watching closely, she looked at the end to see whether she was at 3 minutes and 45 seconds, and she missed it by just a slice of a second. So well done. Our next speaker is Dr. Gloria Luong from the Department of Human Development and Family Studies. Gloria, welcome.
All right, well, maybe it's appropriate that I'm going to be talking about stress today then. So when we reflect back on the pandemic, we can think about the negative impacts that it's had on our mental health, our physical health, and of course the death toll that it's had on society. And in particular, when we think about how it's affected older adults, right? They were subjected to some of the most severe social isolation and quarantine measures because if they contracted the virus, they were more likely to experience long-term physical health conditions and even death. And yet, this is a story of resilience because when we look at how older adults fared in terms of the pandemic, we actually see that they were quite resilient in terms of their mental health. They showed relatively low levels of depressive symptoms and anxiety, and relatively high levels of emotional well-being, especially when we compare them to adolescents and younger adults. You know, this kind of mirrors really well what we know in the aging literature regarding the aging paradox. That is, as we get older, we tend to have more problems with our physical health and our cognitive functioning. And yet, despite all of that, we also see that people's social relationships and their emotional well-being are stable or even improved. Why might that be the case? Well, that's the crux of my research. I've been trying to really disentangle why this aging paradox exists. And we've been pointing to a few different reasons why this might be the case. One is that older adults seem to be really adept at cultivating positive and supportive relationships. And this seems to be really important for times of need, right? We need social support, especially during times like a pandemic. We also find that stress isn't inevitable, so we're gonna have to find ways to manage it and deal with it. And we find that older adults use different strategies, their approach to stress is different, and this helps them to show resilience in the face of adversity. And although we tend to think of our shrinking time horizons as a negative thing, what this does as we get older is that it gives us a different perspective on life. It allows us to prioritize goals in different ways, pursue different motivations, and really put things in perspective, right? Think about whether you want to get into a conflict with a loved one or just really share and enjoy time with those that we love. So how this fits in with the college's vision and mission is that we care deeply about optimizing health and well-being for people and communities. And my work really tries to understand what are the boundary conditions that come with aging. That is, what are the strengths and the vulnerabilities that come with aging, and how do we apply these lessons to help people age in a more healthy kind of way? I think my work makes an impact in a couple different ways. And what we've been trying to do is to help people understand, accept, and really value their own emotional experiences. And what do I mean by that? Think about the last time that you experienced a so-called negative emotion, an emotion like anxiety or sadness or anger. And then did you experience an emotion related to that emotion? And what I mean by that is, did you get upset with yourself for being sad or maybe embarrassed that you got really angry in a situation? This puts certain kinds of standards on us about how we should be feeling in certain contexts, what goals we should have, and this can be really unrealistic because negative emotions are really normal kinds of emotions, and we find that people who can seek value in these experiences actually show better well-being. We're starting to teach people mindfulness strategies in their daily lives at Columbine Health Systems, a senior housing facility. And this allows people to be accepting and understanding of their own emotional experiences in a non-judgmental way. And so far, initial findings suggest that this is actually quite adaptive and really helpful for the staff as well as the older adult residents living in these communities. I still have 5 seconds, so thank you very much.
Fellow, front row.
Hi, great talk.
Great, thank you.
So I was wondering, I studied cardiovascular disease, and there's risk factors, right, when that changes in terms of improved outcomes to worse. Is there the same thing for social outcomes, but the opposite way? Like, is there a certain age that you target, or how is the relationship changed within old age?
Oh, okay, in terms of like as we get older and our social relationships, is that what you mean?
Yep.
Yeah. It's a really complex relationship, to be honest. So starting in our 20s, we already start seeing that people's social networks are shrinking. So it's not really the size that matters, it's really the quality, right? So rather than quantity, it's quality. And what we start to see is that, there are different kinds of shifts that happen across adulthood from younger, middle age, and older adulthood. Lots of qualitative shifts like, in young adulthood, you might not get to really choose who you want to hang out with as much. Maybe you have a roommate situation or you have a boss that you don't really like that much, but you really need to climb the career ladder. In middle age, you start having a family and kids, things like this. But in later adulthood, the nice thing about the flexibility there is that when you're retired, you don't have to deal with that nasty boss anymore. We have the best bosses here in the College of Health and Human Sciences, by the way, so we don't have that problem. But you don't have to deal with, these really untenable, not so nice kind of social situations that we don't like to have. And so you have more structure, more flexibility around those kinds of relationships. And older adults are also really good at avoiding conflict in these situations as well, whereas when we look at what younger adults are doing, and when I say younger, I mean 20s and 30s, people like go at it, right? So there are kinds of different goals related to like why someone would want to do that. So yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To follow up on that a little bit, I was interested when you put the slide up about aging paradox, and what came to my mind was retirement was one of the reasons that people may have reacted better in social dynamics in later life. Have there been studies that have looked at the effect of retirement on improving social interactions, or contrary to that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Retirement is really tricky because there are a lot of individual differences there. So for some people, if you revolved your life and meaning around like, this is my career, this was my everything, and you don't have other meaningful activities lined up after you retire, we're starting to see that that could be really not so beneficial for certain people. And you lose access to your networks as well when you retire, right? Whereas for other people, this is like a great time where you get to garden and do all the social activities and pickleball and the things that you didn't get to do, right? So there's a lot of variability there. And I think depending on how you sort of choose your own adventure related to what that experience means to you, I think that could really have a different kind of impact on your health and well-being. Great questions. Thank you.
I'm starting to have some concerns that they won't allow me to set up this room next time we do this. You'll notice that we strategically placed the clock where it's almost impossible to see from the podium. So probably next year I'll have to let somebody else do that, right? Our next speaker is from the Department of Occupational Therapy, Dr. Arlene Schmid.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Arlene Schmid. I've been doing yoga research for about 20 years now, which is a really long time in my life, but yoga is 5,000 years old, so it's not really that long. But I would say our first slide is really on innovation, and yoga is not innovative because it's 5,000 years old. It's what we've done with yoga. It's where we've put yoga. It's who we've had be able to do yoga. And so 20 years ago, there was almost no research on yoga, except what was kind of happening is this audience. So if yoga was added to people in college, did they do better? Yes, everybody does better with yoga is the answer. But if we start adding yoga to folks' lives who have disabilities, so consider someone with a stroke, a brain injury, a spinal cord injury, the first question was, is yoga even feasible? Is it beneficial? And so again, the answer is yes. Yes, we can do yoga with folks with really significant disabilities. And we keep doing this for 20 years, and we've learned many lessons. And one of the lessons is that yoga is great, but yoga is not enough. If I'll tell you my biggest life secret, it's yoga increases falls, and we don't want that, right? And so now what's really innovative is with my team, who some folks are in the audience here, we now really merge yoga with therapy, with education, to help manage things like diabetes, like fall prevention, like stroke fall risk factors. The population is also really innovative. In this picture in the bottom, those folks are World War II veterans in Indiana. So it's very innovative to get people in the Midwest who are 90-some years old, who are ex-Marines, on the floor with an eye mask, right? Integration, we can think about it one way in our college, and I do, and I know we really changed the lives and the health and wellness of people in our studies, and therefore the people in our community. But we can also think about integrating yoga into rehabilitation practices and integrating yoga into hospital care. And we can really think about integrating people in this room and working together. So most of the projects that I do really have people and their expertise from 4 different departments just in this college. And it's one of those things, it takes a village, and we wouldn't be able to do it without each other because we have people like Heather Leach help us ask the exercise questions and figure out things like dose, which is really important when, again, we're trying to study yoga that people don't really understand. And then finally, if we look at the impact, I can very truthfully, 100% say we have a very positive impact on people who do yoga with us.
We see this at the personal level where people say, yeah, this changed my balance and range of motion. But then we hear, this changed my life. This changed my emotions. I don't cry at all the sad Hallmark Christmas movies anymore. It happens. I don't get road rage anymore, right? And so it literally is changing people's lives. So our impact is tremendous. And now what we're trying to start doing is integrating at the therapist level so that we can change more people's lives through yoga. But we really have to intervene at the therapist level, teaching them how to integrate yoga into rehabilitation practice so that they can help people. I teach my students in OT that anyone they see has had some level of trauma, and if we can help calm down the nervous system through things like yoga or other aspects of integrative care, I suspect we can really have much better outcomes in rehab, but most likely in their medical stay overall. The last but not least, because you're right, it's big and red, the idea of moving into new locations and new populations. So moving yoga into rural health, moving yoga to online and being able to safely do yoga for folks who are older, who are at risk for falls, but are only online. So there's a lot of potential, a lot of opportunity, but I think we're really having a great impact with our research that we do.
I didn't realize I got an introduction just to ask a question. Arlene, does the context matter? Do you see any fundamental differences in doing yoga by yourself with a YouTube video versus with a group of people indoors versus on a paddle board on Horsetooth outside? Does it matter?
Yes, I would say yes. So for one, I think outdoor yoga is overrated personally because there's ants and bugs. Paddleboard I like, but I think the reality is the social component is tremendous. And so that is something we're trying to figure out. We would not have gone online if it were not for COVID. And I would say the yoga we did was not the yoga we wanted to do, but it was safe. But I think they miss that social component, and they don't get to interact and go to coffee or something after yoga, and I think we're missing that. And so we are working on, if we're online, how to do that. But then when we're in person, we really see it naturally evolve, and that happens in every study we do. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Does it matter what level they come into in terms of range of flexibility that you see these positive outcomes? Because I mean, I personally, candidly speaking, can't touch my toes.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
So yoga can be frustrating. So do these happen early or later?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so what I would say is we're really, this is a place where we're really mixing yoga and OT. OT is all about modifying something and meeting someone where they are. But so is yoga. So the great part about yoga is it naturally comes with a whole bunch of things like bolsters and blocks and straps so that all of us could be doing a pose, but it will look different for everyone. And so I think it helps people feel more comfortable and that it's kind of the norm to be modified. It does not matter if you can touch your toes. It doesn't matter if you can stand on your head, I promise. All of our yoga, we start all seated postures. And the goal is to get to the floor, because if you've done yoga, Shavasana is best on the floor with the eye mask, but lots of people can't get there. And so then we do yoga in the chair, and we do a forward fold instead, and they still have that relaxation component. But we don't care if you can touch your toes. We can do so much with you that you'll feel, like I said, people say, this changed my life. And so that's where we're going.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Next, from the School of Education, Dr. James Folkstead.
Okay, thanks for listening. I'm James, and what I'm interested in is metacognition and getting individuals. Is this on still? There we go. Okay. Wow, just touch it right. So I'm interested in metacognition and getting individuals to understand metacognition and to change their behavior around metacognitive practices. So I just have to look in the right place. The innovation I'll talk about is called U-behavior. That we developed it here on campus. It's a learning and teaching method, and I can't see my slides. So it's like a Fitbit for learning, and it resides in the Canvas learning management system. It's like an activity tracker for fitness. It provides feedback on learning behaviors for students on our campus. So you can see it's in the LMS there, and it graphs out an individual student's practice behavior and gives them feedback on what they've done during the semester. We coach the students on science of learning practice behaviors. Testing, spacing, and interleaving are the 3 behaviors we're really interested in, and we coach them to change their behaviors. It's really about behavior change here, right? When we look at what students do, they don't use optimal behaviors. Almost 98% of them don't. So this was created within a center that I run. Integration, we have support from the Undergraduate Technology Advisory Committee group. They're really supportive of this. Their goal is to support students. We are now considered a student success initiative with this U-behavior application here at CSU, so we get some support there. It's integrated into the Canvas learning management system, so we can put this into basically any class on our campus. And it's recognized nationally as well. So we got recognized for instructional design, UX, by EDUCAUSE in 2020 and then 2021. Oh man, I have all sorts of time. In 2021, we were recognized for the use of learning analytics for learning and teaching. So impact, this is what's really exciting. We've been running this for about 2.5 years now on our campus, and I'll show you some of the impact that we're having. So the bulk of the data that I'll show you here isn't from microbiology, but then we'll look at physics as well. So Physics 141 and MIP 300. So what you're looking at here on the left-hand side is low practice behavior, so that they're not spacing, mixing, or interleaving. Their practice, these are students in that semester 2020 that were in the low category, and then on the right-hand side you can see the students that we moved into the high practice behavior. And the percentage scores that you see on the red line, those are their comprehensive final exam scores. So you can see as we move students over into the high impact metacognitive practice behaviors, their scores go up significantly. This was in 2020. I'll show you a few more semesters here. We're seeing the same trend repeated over and over semester by semester. This is 2021, same class. And then we've repeated it in physics. We're running it in physiology courses this semester, and we're going to keep moving it into other classes as we progress along. Some things qualitatively that I'll point out is that I just put these quotes up here from students. They want more, okay? They see the impact. They're understanding the impact of these behaviors on their ability to retain information long term and to manage their metacognitive behaviors. They're seeing U-behavior having an impact. It helped me prepare. It helped me change my practice. They're saying these types of things. I didn't have to cram for this particular exam, this comprehensive exam. I didn't have to cram as much, maybe as much. Didn't have to cram, and therefore I could focus on the other exams that I had during that semester. So that's it.
I'm just watching. I have a question.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have like all of the best behaviors either.
Right.
So can I change those using this method?
Do you mean in or out of the classroom?
Yeah, you want the Fitbit, right? You want the Fitbit for learning. Yeah, so there's a couple things that you need to implement this particular tool, but there's all sorts of practices that you can do on your own, right? You can space out your practice, but it's hard. It's absolutely challenging, and that's what we're faced with when we try to get students to change their behaviors, right? And that's where we sort of drove this research, and that's where we got to, was they needed some sort of feedback in that U-behavior Fitbit graph that graphs out their behavior. They needed to see it, right? It's just like, if the fitness activity trackers that we have, we look at our watch and it says to stand up, or we haven't been standing up enough, we need that feedback to change our behavior. So that's what we've done. I didn't answer your question, but I know. It's a hard question. There are things you can do, but it takes discipline, right? Yeah.
Hi. You mentioned spacing, mixing, interleaving. Can
Yeah.
you define those, or are those the only three behaviors?
Well, I couldn't define them in 4 minutes, but I'll try now. Okay, so spacing is basically practicing things across time. Okay, so the same concepts or the same ideas across time, right? We know that this is beneficial. What students do when we graphed out students' behavior on our campus in multiple different types of classes, they master their practice. So if you give them practice quizzes, practice activities, they'll do them all in the same day until they get 100%, and they'll never come back to it again. What we're having them do is space it out over time. That's spacing. Interleaving is easy. It's just mixing up different type concepts. So you might go from like one chapter's content to another chapter's content, and then back to the number one. So that's the mixing component. Now, in the literature, there's nuances to mixing or interleaving, okay? I can't get into those right now, but that's a challenging one. But the spacing is so robust in the literature, we know that's beneficial.
That's really helpful. Thanks.
Yep.
Don't tell me, let me guess. Dr. Jamie Yoder from Social Work, thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Last but not least, I'm Jamie Yoder. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to talk to you all about sexual violence. It's not a fun topic, but this is where my work is. These are the messages we get in society, the prevailing messages that permeate our culture around how to stop and prevent sexual violence. These messages convey the responsibility, the onus, and the burden on the victims and the survivors to stop themselves from being sexually abused. My research flips this message on its head, where I know the only way we are going to stop sexual violence is by intervening in stopping perpetrators of sexual violence. We know that sexual violence peaks during adolescence, between the ages of about 14 to 15 years old. And from my own research, one of the most salient etiological risk factors is childhood adversity, trauma, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, cumulative trauma. Unfortunately, believe it or not, in my field, there are known treatments to address this problem that integrate trauma into the work. So what have I done? I've done just that. Most of my work now is focused on integrating trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy known to be effective at reducing trauma symptoms with problem sexual behavior in order to advance effective trauma treatments to prevent youth sexual violence. In doing so, we are striving for prevention and cure, recognizing that prevention's on a continuum between primary and tertiary. We are situating this intervention right at the secondary, tertiary level. This is an anti-oppressive, participatory action approach. In developing this model, we have gained community perspectives. We have asked parents and caregivers. We have talked deeply with practitioners and clinicians. We are promoting health and well-being via the integration of core mental health targets, namely trauma. Trauma has largely been unaddressed when we talk about treating and working with kids who commit acts of sexual violence. Why? Because of the stigma. because we're afraid to talk about it, because we're afraid to connect the dots between early life adversity and the perpetuation of this crime. We're seeking to narrow the science practitioner gap via translational research. The idea that we're bringing this back into our communities, and we have recognized through many different surveys we've done more recently with practitioners and clinicians the great need for this work. Upwards of 95% of our clinicians we've recently interviewed indicated that they need more tools in their belt to address trauma. These are my own kids up here. I wanted to convey that this work doesn't just start and end with the work I'm doing. It starts with all of you. That the only way we're actually going to prevent this type of behavior from continuing on is by talking to our kids, educating our young kids about what consent means, what does healthy sexual relationships mean, hypermasculinity, specifically with young white males. We need to have these conversations at home and in the research. An effort to really build community safety, education, and awareness, and to help survivors and potential victims moving forward. So thank you so much. Aren't they cute though?
So cute.
Are there good role models? Are there countries or cultures that are doing this really, really well that we can learn from?
No. The US has especially done it horribly because we don't like to talk about sex. We have images and messages around society that says sex sells and, hey kids, here's access to a cell phone. And you're not allowed to talk about it, and you're not allowed to bring it up at a dinner table, and you're not allowed to have these conversations. So what do kids do with that information, right? I'm working with some colleagues in Sweden right now to really roll this model out, and a lot of them are saying the same things, that the cultural messages are so inconsistent. So unfortunately, we don't have a good model. We don't have anyone in this world who is doing this the right way. So the hope is that by, again, putting the onus on the people who are committing these acts is where we need to take responsibility. Yeah.
Thanks. What are your dependent variables? So I'm thinking about, is it they do commit sexual violence or they don't, and that's it? Or do you have...
So yes, for a long time, the research has been focused on recidivism. To what extent do these people go back out into the community and recommit the offense? A lot of my research is actually focused on reducing trauma symptoms, increasing healthy relational capacities between caregivers and youth, and increasing executive functioning capacities. Those are the short-term proximal outcomes that lead to the distal outcomes of healthy sexual behavior. And we know that through a lot of the etiological research I've already done. So that's the goal, right? We have to target the proximal things to lead to long-term effects. Thank you.
We now have an opportunity to hear from college deans fellows. I always look forward to this. And so our first speaker today comes from the Department of Construction Management, Mohammed Timouri. Mohammed's going to come and share his research conducted under the aegis of the College Dean's Fellowship.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mohammed Timouri. I'm a PhD candidate in a joint program in construction management and civil engineering departments. First, I wanted to thank College of Health and Human Sciences for this fellowship, and specifically the Dean's Office. It helped me through my PhD journey at CSU and gave me a confidence as an international student to grow. So let's start with my project. I bet that all of you have seen the trucks that City of Fort Collins send during the winter, right? My project is about the impacts of brine solutions that City of Fort Collins and other states are using to minimize the freezing risk during the winter. These brine solutions are contain sodium chloride, magnesium chloride, and calcium chloride. The problem is that these chloride ions can penetrate to the concrete and initiate something called concrete corrosion because they attack the rebars inside the concrete. It's not the end of the story. We have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. These carbon dioxide enter to the concrete and reduce the pH, and as you can see, release some of the chloride ions and increase the number of chloride on the rebar surfaces. It means we have more corrosion and more deterioration. We need rehabilitation and repair. So the last phenomenon called something desorption. It's very technical. So the most innovation part of this research is the impact of de-icing and anti-icing agents on the concrete pavements. This project aligns well. Before that, I need to say something. If you have a dog at home, be careful because these brine solutions are not good for dogs. Don't go for a walk a day before snow and a few days after that. So about the integration to the College of Health and Human Sciences, the outcome of this research aligns well with the values like playing as a global leader, supporting creativity and discovery, promoting well-being of community, and supporting transformative research because the outcomes will help to sustainable development of concrete structures and will help to have pavement that lasts longer and need less maintenance. Nobody likes the construction sites, right? The road closure sites. So I will try to improve the durability of the concrete. And at the end, it's a interdisciplinary research between civil, construction, and the chemistry. About the impacts, we are in touch with Mr. Steve Varnell. He's the operation manager in City of Fort Collins, helped us to connect samples. So he's eager to benefit from the results. While in different states we have snow practices guidelines, it's not specified why they are using a specific type of brine solutions with different concentrations. So we will try to provide them a framework that, okay, that's fine. If you want to use different brine solutions and different concentration, even at CSU we are using different brine solutions compared to the Fort Collins. That's fine, use it, but you need to know the consequences. And at the end, I had the chance to present part of this research in 2 conferences by support of the college. I went to the Transportation Research Board conference, and my poster was accepted to be presented at American Concrete Institute convention because this part of the research is a meaningful contribution to the body of knowledge. With that, I want to thank you all, and if you have any question, I would be happy to answer that. About your dogs?
I guess my question is for the dogs comment.
I'm not an expert in that field, but
No, I mean, I'm just curious because you wouldn't put this solution in residential streets or sidewalks. It would be more in commercial or business settings. So how does that affect, I guess, the dog walks?
So that's a hard question. The thing is that there is a trade-off between minimizing the risk of freezing in sidewalks and concrete pavements and the sustainability, durability, and pets. So right now, I reach out to different cities and talk to them. So right now, the first priority is reducing the freezing risk immediately. They wanted to melt down the snow like that. They put something called magnesium chloride inside the brine solutions, which is not good for pets and even for concrete. So We are trying to provide them the information so even with other brine solutions and lower concentration, you can achieve your goals. You're welcome.
Hi. Are there like negative implications for the surrounding environment with the current solutions that we have? Because it sounds like if it's corrosive enough to eat through pavement, then runoff into different areas would be a problem as well.
Yes, we haven't looked at that, but for concrete pavement, I've heard that, for example, in Fort Collins, they have to change all of them every 4 years, which is a lot for concrete pavements. So they're supposed to last very long, but because we don't care about the brine solutions that we are using, so we deteriorate them pretty fast. But you are right, maybe there's a lot of consequences.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next Dean's Fellow comes from Food Science and Human Nutrition, Elliot Graham.
Oh man, I know what everyone was talking about. I'm so short. Okay, well, thank you everyone, and thank you for the college for allowing us Dean's Fellows to speak. Today I'll be talking to you about my research, which investigates the effects of intermittent fasting on both vascular function and viral infection. So what we study in our lab, which is run by Drs. Christopher Gentile and Tiffany Weir, is how obesity leads to cardiovascular disease, also known as heart disease, the leading cause of death worldwide. Now, specifically what we look at is how obesity leads to abnormal changes to both the structure and function of our blood vessels, also called vascular dysfunction, which is an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So really, what we look at in the lab is how obesity leads to vascular dysfunction. Over the past few years in our lab, we have shown that detrimental changes to the types of bacteria in our gut, also called the gut microbiota, lies at the intersection of obesity and vascular dysfunction. Now, the gut microbiota is important for many things, but one of the things it's most important for is optimization of our immune system, or the collection of cells and tissues that responds to foreign invaders. So when there are detrimental changes to the gut microbiota during obesity, the immune system will alter or adjust accordingly, usually by increasing inflammation, which can lead to vascular dysfunction. So again, what we see during obesity is harmful changes to the gut microbiota, the immune system, which leads to vascular dysfunction. And since we're in the nutrition department, we're interested in what dietary strategies can mitigate these effects of obesity. So intermittent fasting is now the most popular dietary strategy in the United States and is defined as no food intake followed by continuing normal eating habits for repeated bouts of time. So using our preclinical obese mouse models, what we hypothesize is that if we put them on an intermittent fasting protocol, we will see beneficial changes to the gut microbiota, reductions in certain immune cells, particularly inflammatory immune cells, and improvements in vascular function. Now, this is great for chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease, but these reductions in immune cells might have an underlying consequence. And with the continued presence of the COVID-19 pandemic, highlighted by the SARS-CoV-2, we might see a scenario where intermittent fasting, although beneficial for vascular function and cardiovascular disease, can worsen SARS-CoV-2 infection severity. And I put this question mark here because although this is what we hypothesize, this will be the first study to directly compare how intermittent fasting affects SARS-CoV-2 infection severity in preclinical models. And we will be using techniques that directly translate to human health, and again, potentially uncovering an underlying effect of a popular dietary strategy. So in order to integrate these findings into the college's vision and mission, which is to conduct transformative research, both pertinent to humans and communities, we can switch out our preclinical mouse model once we understand the mechanisms at play for individuals, obese individuals, put them on an intermittent fasting protocol, and look at how does intermittent fasting affect changes to the gut microbiota, the immune system, and vascular function. And of course, we will not be infecting our participants with SARS-CoV-2, but indirectly, we can look at how does this intermittent fasting protocol
affect their responsiveness towards antiviral therapeutics, long COVID symptoms, or the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. So ultimately, we believe that our preclinical studies, as well as our upcoming clinical studies, will have a massive impact on both human and community health and further uncover the bidirectional relationships between SARS-CoV-2, heart disease, and how we eat. Thank you.
This is really fun stuff. Can you talk a little bit more about the intermittent fasting protocol?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah, so I didn't want to get into that too much because that would have taken a whole nother 4 minutes. But so what we do in our mice is once a week, 24-hour fasting. So usually on Mondays, we'll take their food away, and it's just a standard chow. So all the mice get the same diet. And usually in our studies, we'll have lean mice as well as obese mice to look at are there any differing effects between obesity. And then after 24 hours, we'll just give them their food back, and they'll eat ad libitum or as desired. They do have water the entire time, so we're not water fasting them as well, just food.
Additional questions for Elliot? You have a moment to speak there. Dr. Bell, thank you once again. I owe you.
That's super cool stuff, really interesting. What's the time course of the decline in the immune cells from the feeding? And can you just manipulate the intermittent fasting protocol? So humans like 12 hours on, 12 hours off or something like that instead of 24?
Yeah, so there's been a ton of studies that show that 24 hours in mice, granted, these aren't in obese, they're in control lean mice, it actually does change the immune system and promotes a massive reduction in immune cells in the circulation. A couple papers have now shown that it's not that these immune cells are dying, they're actually moving to other tissues. So they'll actually harvest back in the bone marrow, which is a primary organ that they're made in, and then upon refeeding, they'll actually come back out to the tissues that they were originally present in. So that's something we also have to pay attention to, is there might not just be reductions in immune cells, but where are they headed? But to answer your question, there have been studies that show just 24 hours, and I think even 6 hours in mice does promote changes in immune cell abundances in certain tissues and in the circulation. It would be hard to manage, well, how do we then do that without fasting, right, an immunosuppressant or something like that. But again, that might have other detrimental consequences with an acute infection. But, thank you.
Our final Dean's Fellow, is Heidi here? Yes, she is, and here she comes. Heidi Sang from Human Development and Family Studies.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Heidi. I use she, her pronouns, and I also study. Yes, I also study the well-being paradox of aging, like Gloria does. And the heartbeat behind the study are thousands of interviews in the field site back in Taiwan. So I used to be part of the research team who do epidemiology studies, looking for factors contributing to healthy aging. And working with that group, I was fortunate to be able to travel intensively around that small island and get to meet a lot of new old friends. And during the interviews, actually we do a lot of clinical examinations. On top of that, we also do home interviews. We went to their house and then talked to them for 3, 4, 5, even just like whole day, to know more about them and about their lives. And during that conversation, I sometimes would feel really distressed by seeing so many of them suffering from untreatable pain, also chronic diseases. But sometimes I would also feel so inspired by many of them, on top of that suffering and pain, still leading an active, productive life and telling me that old age is the best time in their life. And I believe that's the repeated exposure of such kind of like discussion makes me wonder if there exists an universal like inner attributes or external determinants of high levels of subjective well-being. Also, under what circumstances would inevitable declines and losses with aging no longer stand in the way of leading a satisfying life? And at CSU, I'm really fortunate to have very supportive mentors, and I can have access to a 20-year longitudinal data set, which is dedicated to the study of the psychosocial processes of healthy aging. And I can afford to use state-of-the-art rigorous analytical approaches to quantitatively and figuratively describe the trajectory of subjective well-being from age 60s to 80s. I can test easily under these structural equation modeling of Lenten growth curve modeling framework to examine predictors. I'm interested in some time invariant ones like sex, education, and also personality traits. And I can easily model that as a predictors to the trajectory of well-being. And the trajectory of well-being can be easily modeled as a predictor of a further developmental outcome. This is how flexible and potent that modeling techniques could be. And in addition to that, I can test some time varying predictors, such as age-related changes in health and other time-varying predictors that go beyond the different scores of 2 or 3 time points. They can be modeled as a separate trajectories so that I can test them and examine them parallelly to see their dynamic trajectory, say, whether, when, and to what extent the trajectory of subjective well-being is decoupled from the trajectory of, say, physicians' rating of health. Lastly, I would expect the study of the change in stability of subjective well-being, as well as the processes behind it, would contribute to the basic sciences of gerontology. And the result drawing from this line of study would also inform future research in applied fields. For example, one of the processes that I'm interested in addition to what Gloria just mentioned, is adults' views of aging. Simply put, it's about the belief, thoughts, feelings, and awareness that good things do happen and would expect it to happen as a result of having grown older. In this work, I particularly interested in testing whether and to what extent views of aging can contribute to the paradox. And results, applied researchers can easily choose to leverage that kind of modifiable processes in the intervention to lead to optimal development outcomes, even among those who suffer from severe losses and declines in life. Thank you so much.
I was interested in how the research began. Like you shared that there were 5,000 plus interviews. So was that a part of a larger study? Was it just in Taiwan? How did it start?
Yes, the funded study, I didn't use the Taiwanese data set for this Dean's Fellowship study. My data set came from Germany. Mostly people were half of them were from Heidelberg and the other half is from Leipzig. I have 500 older adults participating in the study. But in the future, it's also my goal to implement analytical strategies to the Taiwanese data set. It's still ongoing. We're still working on that. We're collecting the third wave data. So yeah, thank you for the question.
One more.
You've mentioned now 2 different cultures. Do you anticipate that these will have cross-cultural similarities, or do you think it will vary across different countries, different cultures?
Yes, that's a good question. So I have like personal experience back in Taiwan and right now in the United States studying older adults here. And the data set was from Germany. So I do expect cultural differences, but at the moment with this data set, which is more homogeneous in its racial and ethnical composition, I doubted if it could be generalized to like other older adults and more diverse cultural backgrounds. But the interesting would be, while I was back in Taiwan, sometimes it took longer time to really ask about their feelings and thoughts. So it takes us like almost whole day really to ask about like, do you feel happy? They are more like conservative in answering this kind of subjective question. So I don't have a really good answer for your question, but this is definitely a food for thoughts while I analyzing the data across different cultures.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Would you join me in saying thank you to our faculty colleagues and the Dean's Fellows for sharing their work? Our fourth annual research day, and it's a celebration from start to finish. In fact, for those of us that have the opportunity to be involved with planning, it's a celebration for several months as we look forward to this particular day. And I want to take a few moments to share some words of thank you before we take a short break, and then we're going to come back and continue the celebration by recognizing award winners from this morning's poster competition. I want to start my thanks, as I always do, with Dean Youngblood. This is her brainchild. It's her baby in many ways. It's emblematic of Lisa, as I've gotten to know and appreciate her over the last several years. This combination of expecting and celebrating excellence is really embodied so nicely in our dean, and I'm thankful that I have an opportunity to work for her, and I hope all of you are thankful that you work in a college that is under such stellar leadership. So Lisa, thank you very much. We appreciate it. After Lisa, I'm reluctant to name names because the team that's involved in putting this together is enormous, but I am going to lift one out. I think he's probably not in here, so I can get away with it. But Lee Nagel is the glue that holds so many aspects of this college together, and today would have been impossible without Lee. He was sending us emails yesterday from work as he was preparing many of the elements for today. So I do want to call Lee out by name. And again, I don't see him in here, and even if he was, he probably wouldn't raise his hand. So, but will you join me in saying thank you to Lee? And I might encourage you, if you happen to be bumping into him on campus or have 5 seconds to drop an email and tell him, hey, we appreciate all your hard work. I know that would... that's true. Here I am burning through all of our natural resources. So perhaps instead of an email, walk over to Gibbons and see him face to face and tell him thanks. In addition, of course, we have our communications team, we have our IT folks, and so many others that the day would not exist without. I'm looking at a couple guys right here, but again, the team is a multi-layered team. We enjoy working together, which is really pretty darn cool, and it makes this day come off in a nice way. And so, again, join me in saying thank you to all of the folks that make Research Day possible.